Hello, and welcome to Eric McElroy's American Exchange with me, Eric McElroy. This is the podcast where, from here in London, I dial back across the pond to find out what is happening in my home country, especially in the run up to the election. Things are getting crazy. This week's guest is a fantastic Malynda Hale. She is a singer, a writer, an activist. She's a contributor and commentator on CNN and ABC, and she's also the host of the Black Voices Heard Project, which talks with different Black voices, as it obviously is in the title. It's a very clearly labeled title, to find out the experience of being Black and their lives in America. It's on TikTok and Instagram, and she's also the host of We Need to Talk, a podcast that she's been doing for 4 years and talking to a range of fascinating people. This was such a fun conversation. We talked about race, we talked about religion, we talked about the state of the race from her perspective, which is feeling hopeful. But the message is we still need to work to get the vote out if you do believe in democracy and freedom and things like that. So, yes, this is one of those biased podcasts that believes in the things that are actually American values. She was brilliant. I really love this talk. Please enjoy Malynda Hale. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this is the point where you can like the video and subscribe to the channel and, do that stuff that you do. Comment as well, even the things that just call me a liberal. Well, there's obviously, if you look on some of the previous videos, some of the comments are quite colorful. In the meantime, here's Malynda Hale. I'm very excited to welcome a new guest to the podcast today, Malynda Hale. And just see, my first question always, Malynda, when I start out, other than saying thank you for coming here, which isn't a question, it's more of a statement, but thank you for coming on, is because I'm in the UK, and the whole idea of this podcast is for me to, and I'm a big follower of US politics. I care deeply about what happens for a variety of reasons, but I'm not on the ground. So I can't get a sense and a feel of the winds of change. And, way back in 2016, I felt a little worry and ick and fear. And, and sometimes I think, oh no, everything must be fine. So how are you feeling? How is the environment and the circles that you're in? I know it's a huge question, but
It is a
we're about
huge question.
around a month to go until the election.
Yeah, how am I feeling? It varies day by day, I will say. There are
Hmm.
moments when I feel hopeful that I feel, okay, we're gonna get on the other side of this. And there are moments when I'm like, this is gonna be a repeat. I think a lot of people feel that way because, first of all, with the debates, we already had the presidential debate. We just recently had the vice presidential debate. Those were two very different dynamics. And for
Yeah.
for me, watching both, when I watched the first one with Trump and Kamala Harris, I was like, this is a wash. Like this is easy. She completely obliterated him. She spoke in full sentences. He came across very crazy and unhinged. But then when you see something that's civil, like with JD
Mm.
Vance and with Tim Walz, and both parties are explaining their visions for America, despite them being completely two different visions, you take a step back and like, oh no. Are people are gonna actually like fall for this? So I think there it just kind of comes in waves, and it's like this roller coaster feeling of ups and downs, and not really knowing what's gonna happen. I don't think you can really trust the polls. I don't think that people should be complacent and thinking, oh, we got this. Like, no, it's not. Of course, I'm speaking from a Democratic standpoint.
Mm.
But I don't think that we need to keep, our feet off the ground. We need to keep going and pushing and mobilizing and making sure people are registered to vote. I mean, I read a statistic there were 80 million people that weren't even registered to vote in
Yeah.
2020. And so that's been what my biggest advocacy points have been, has been getting people mobilized, getting people registered to vote, explaining why their vote matters, because there's so many
Mm.
people that think that their vote doesn't matter. So that's really been what my focus has been.
Okay. Yeah, I think, well, voter disenfranchisement is such a big issue and such a problem on the Democratic side of things because,
Yeah.
there's typically a surge for the presidential elections, but then it drops off, and then we have to rebuild that coalition again, and it just goes round and round and round. Um, I guess, does it feel there's the urgent, because in 2020 it felt urgent because Trump was so clearly bad.
Yeah.
Um, and the COVID was happening and people were dying, and they were incompetent leadership, and it was like, which people seem to have forgotten about. I mean, that we've seen that in the UK as well, this COVID
Yeah, yeah.
amnesia, understandably. But is the urgency there?
It is, and I think it's not even just urgency, it's the resurgence of hope. Like what you felt
Yeah.
when Obama what was running, something new, something fresh, a different form of leadership. And, she's been running on the platform of joy, which I absolutely love. But I
Mm,
also have been listening to the things that she's saying and the vision that she does have. And one thing that I do want to point out is that excites me about her, and also really has excited me about Obama and Biden even, is that they are talking about being a president for all of America, not
yeah.
just their party. And that's not something that you really hear ever from Trump. He's not really trying to unify anybody or bring people together. So I
Yeah.
do think that there is this level of hope and excitement. And it feels very reminiscent of when Obama was running, that, oh, there could be this positive change for the country and we can start to really move forward.
Yeah. I mean, that positive change, I mean, what a novel idea to have.
Right.
And it's so frustrating because there's so many good things that I think have been part of the Biden and Harris administration, but because the president's job is to communicate and Biden's communication facilities are not what they were. And
100%.
that's just fact.
Yeah,
Um, and uh, and so that's why I think it's so close to what it is, because that what's come through and that sense of hope, which should naturally be there, is diminished because they
I
haven't
agree.
sold it well enough.
Absolutely.
One thing I found interesting is that the right likes to accuse the left of playing identity politics all the time. You look at people's identities and you recognize it and you talk about it. How dare you? And they're just disgusted by it. Um, but this time around, I'm wondering, because obviously, Kamala Harris is the first woman, well, second woman in this position, but she would be the first woman president. She would be the first, half black and half Indian American. Um, but she obviously isn't campaigning on that in the same way that Hillary did. How does that how do you think personally about that?
Mhm.
Because if you don't mind me acknowledging your womanhood and other things,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
and then but as a political strategy as well. So I guess
Yeah.
both
I
questions
mean,
are there.
I think she's obviously a visual representation of it, so we don't really need to talk about it. And I think one
Mm,
of the things, I obviously I'm for representation and I think it's necessary. And my daughter is biracial, and she keeps asking, is Kamala Harris going to be president? Is Kamala Harris going to be president? And I love that she's involved in seeing someone that looks like her, that is the
yeah.
potential to be the leader of this country, right? But I don't think she needs to run on that because she has merit. She has the
Mm,
qualifications. And they've said this a million times, but she'd be the first president that has worked in all different branches of government. That's
mm,
incredible. And so for people to say that she's not qualified, to demean her existence, to and lower it to just saying she's a DEI hire, which is ridiculous. I mean,
yeah.
you literally elected a reality TV show star that had no prior government experience. And when he decided he wanted to be in part in politics, he went to the top of the ticket. He didn't
Yeah.
start and work his way up, which shows to me that he's not actually for the people. She started from the bottom and worked her way up with different sectors of government, right? So that shows to me that she does actually care about what happens to people. She does actually have a hand in politics and wants to work her way up, so to speak. So
Mm,
I do like that they're not focusing on her being a woman. They're not focusing on her being a woman of color. They're focusing on her accomplishments, her qualifications, that she's educated, that she is trying to unify people. I mean, you see all these groups coming together for all of these calls. They're getting very specific lately I mean, I just saw one that said "Women of Star Trek" for Kamala Harris. I was like, I love it. It's just there's all these different groups that are mobilizing for her, and that to me is because she's such a unifying candidate. She's someone
mm,
that everybody can see themselves in, whether they're a woman, whether they're in leadership, whether they're a person of color. She kind of represents all of America, and I think that that's beautiful. So they don't even need to say it in their campaign messaging because they're seeing it in real time.
mm. And do you think, because obviously there's a lot of misogyny in the world,
Yes.
and in politics, of course. And I know that, I mean, I think there was a number of things that impacted with Hillary. There was just blatant misogyny, but then also the legacy of the Clintons was there as a heavy drag on what that they could do. And then we won't even talk about the emails, but uh,
I know
but
the emails.
how much is that playing? Because there's a lot of talk about, because obviously we do. It's in the UK, because I've been here for 24 years.
Mhm.
The way we talk about race in the UK is different than it is in the US. It's
Oh, I'm sure.
very, I mean, it can be uncomfortable conversations in the US, but it's very uncomfortable here. And that's partly because the country is about 90% or 85% white. And so there's sensitivities towards minority populations, but it just gets really uncomfortable. So the fact that you've got white men for Harris, and then you talk about, you see commentators going, well, the black male, blah, blah, blah. It's just like drilling into that.
Yeah.
It's just, especially because I'm a white guy as well, so I've got, some legacy guilt to deal with. Um, it's fascinating, but I mean, do you think those are good conversations to have to say, like, how are black men dealing with this black woman as a presidential, is that, those questions, are they good
No,
things to be talking about?
yeah, no, I appreciate that question. I don't see it as a negative, so to speak, because I think in general, for anyone that's running for leadership, different groups will be affected by what their policies are, right?
Mm,
I think it depends on how you're having that conversation. Like, are black men not voting for Kamala Harris because they don't think she's black? Like, we don't need to have that conversation. She's half
yeah.
black. We've established this. Like, let's move on. But are you not voting for her because you have heard some misconceptions based on what her prosecutorial record is, and you actually
Mm,
need to do the research? Because of course, incarceration rates when she was a prosecutor were higher for black men. So they may have
yeah.
some, you know, unwarranted animosity towards her because they actually haven't done the research on who she actually was incarcerating, and that it wasn't disproportionate in just black men, and they are believing this lie. There's several black men. DL Hughley is one of them, and I'm so grateful to him for using his platform because he was one of the people that believed that lie about her, and he has been
Mm,
promoting on his platform that he was wrong. He looked it up. She wasn't just incarcerating black men. It actually was not that many black men, and it wasn't even that many people if you look at a record of a prosecutor for how long she was one. So
mm,
it's really, I think people need to have the conversations, but also talk about, okay, if this is what your misconception is, and this group feels this way about her based on what they know, what is the actual truth? And I'm not seeing enough conversation, especially on bigger platforms, about what the actual truth is. So I think it's
yeah.
fine to talk about race and how things will affect. I mean, we talk about it with women. The fact that there's a
Mm,
woman that is running for president and people for and she's for reproductive health care. That's a huge thing, right? So we're
mm.
talking about the positives. We can talk about the negatives as long as we are addressing that some of those negatives might be unwarranted.
And do you think so that well, because you see, especially on the right wing media, they're like, more black men are supporting Trump than ever before, and all that's is that are you seeing that in the groups that you look at and talk to?
I am, and it's incredibly frustrating, this is going to go deep into racial discourse, but what I've noticed about the Black community in general is that there is this rift between Black men and Black women when it comes to certain things. And I
Mm,
think one of the main things is what I talked about, incarceration levels and their belief of what Kamala Harris has done in her past. There's also misconceptions based on what Trump actually did for the Black community.
yeah.
Again, a simple Google search will show you that a lot of those things that are being told to us are not true. Um, So I think there's also this belief in general. Trump is very optically appealing for people that want to achieve a certain level of success. But when you kind of
Mm,
peel back the layers, it's really not worth anything. It's kind of like all of the things that he's selling. It's not real gold, right?
yeah.
Um, so I think for certain members of the Black community, specific Black men, there is this like level of um I don't want to call him like an icon or an idol, but it kind of feels that way
Mm.
because they view him as someone that is, a certain level of success that they want to attain. And I just don't think he's the best role model or example of that for sure.
Well, I mean, talking about gold, you can get gold and diamonds on his new watch if you
I'm
have a
sure they're all
hundred
fake.
thousand
Yeah.
dollars. I've got three, but I wear them all at the same time,
Stop.
just because that balances me out. Uh, yeah, I mean, well, anytime because you said that a few times, like when you actually, I love that phrase, do the research, because I've done some stuff, with right wing media here and other people, and every time I have done the research, it's pretty much reinforced the position that I had in the first place. It's so
Right,
basic.
right,
And
right.
even like, but it's just so insipid. So my wife got a message because my wife doesn't follow politics as much as I do. But she's a specialist in she's a doula and in breastfeeding, and that's her
Oh,
world, and that's
awesome.
where she can
Beautiful.
talk about it till the cows come home on that subject. But she was getting messages from a friend who's in one of those groups saying, well, actually, the Republicans aren't proposing to monitor women's menstrual cycles. That's not what they're doing. That's a lie. And I just did a quick little Google search because I'm like, no, there's definitely been proposals
That's
along these
absolutely,
lines,
absolutely.
and this is real. And it's like four, reputable media services, and so I sent those links for her to share back. But
Yes.
I mean, but that extra 5 seconds, I don't know if that's a a civic failure or what that
It's
is.
there's a lot, but it's the word that you just said, reputable. So they will find
Mm,
sites and blogs and just, random moms at home that'll
yeah,
write things. There's no citations, there's no like, direct back to this research or this, whatever. Their research isn't reputable. Reputable is the key word here. It's the operative word. And so if they're not trusting certain media sources because they think, oh, well, the media lies. I mean, it's like, yes, the media does lie to a certain extent, but there's also things that are like
yeah,
irrefutable. There are facts here, right? And for example, they talk about Kamala Harris doesn't have any policies. Have you gone to her website? It's actually that simple.
yeah,
But for some reason they just can't bring themselves to do that because it's
yeah.
it's easier to complain, right?
Well, I mean, she doesn't just have her policies; she has the legacy of everything that she's done, and
Yeah.
it's just insane that we know what the two parties have their where they have their flagpoles hung. We
Yeah.
know the agenda that's coming forward, and that's why even with Biden as an ineffective communicator, I was supporting him because I know what the journey, what that direction is going to be, which is a pro democracy, pro women's freedom, all those things.
Absolutely.
Um,
You were voting for more than just Biden when he was running. It
yeah,
wasn't even about him, to be honest.
which kind of because the UK, I don't know if we have it now. Yes, we do still. Some of the elections you have here, you actually, when you vote for like local sort of city council representatives, they don't actually put the name of the candidate on the ballot. You just vote for the party.
Oh
And that
wow.
blew my mind for a while because American politics is so driven by personalities and cults of
100%.
personality. I was like, this is
100%.
so weird. But now I'm kind of like, maybe it's not such a bad idea. I mean, I think
I
it is.
think no,
Yeah.
that's interesting though. And you have how many parties are in the UK?
I mean, it's similar in that there's two major parties, and then, but we do have some stronger third parties. So there's one
Hmm.
called the Liberal Democrats, which no one knows quite what they stand for. They're a third party. They're sort of they're like fiscally conservative but socially liberal. And then we
Interesting.
have a new right-wing party called Reform, which is the party that's sort of they're the legacy from Brexit, and they're
Oh, okay. Okay.
but they're it's like, well, it's kind of like what's happened with the Republican Party, and that you've got MAGA, which is far right, and then you've got normal Republicans.
Yeah.
But here it's flipped, and that the MAGA Reform Party is still the minority party. They haven't quite
Okay.
taken over, but they just push the other party further and further to the right, so they might as well be in
Mm.
charge. That's another whole thing. Well, speaking of third parties and other parties, I wanted to ask you because you've had this person as a guest on your previous podcast,
Mhm.
Dr. Cornel West, who is running
Yeah.
as a third party candidate, and as I think he's really targeting the black vote and disenfranchised Democratic voters. I mean, we're in a two party system, and we don't get everything we want.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how well you know him. I know you've spoken to him,
Yeah.
but I mean, what do you
No.
think his hope with doing that?
Well, first and foremost, I have nothing but respect for Dr. Cornel West.
Mm,
I've talked with his wife. I've kept in touch with them on occasion, and I think he is brilliant. I think he is a voice that is needed, and I've
yeah.
learned so much from him. And I think his heart has always been in the right place, and I fully, fully believe that he wants to see this country be in the best position possible. I believe that he cares. Um, I just don't think the timing was right.
Mm,
I believe that there is a possibility where we could truly uplift a third party in the future, but it has to start at a time that makes sense. A
yeah.
lot of third parties only show up the year of the election, and that's not the right thing to do. Like you have to
Yeah.
start for like 2028, you have to start now. If or
Yeah.
even you should have started 4 years ago, right? You have to start at the local level also, and you
Yeah.
also have to get more people registering as the third party, but still maybe voting blue. Yes, I'm pushing voting
Mm,
blue, but registering to show like, hey, I don't know if I align myself with being a Democrat anymore, but I'm voting for this right now because these are still issues that I care for. But
yeah.
it's a process, right? So I think that the unfortunate part is because he, in a lot of the things that he says, does have a powerful message, does have things that I think are would be beneficial to this country. It's just not the right time, and it's more of a distraction than it is a help. Because I do think people, and again, I don't want people to be told how to vote,
Yeah.
but it is a throwaway vote, and unfortunately, it is taking it away and giving it to a side that you should be scared if they get elected again, right? So that's the unfortunate part. I just don't think that it's the right timing. But I do believe in him and
Mm,
everything that he has to say, and I think he's a wonderful human being with a beautiful heart. It's just disappointing that I would think that he would know that this isn't the right time to do this,
yeah.
and it's not going to help. You know?
I wonder how much his calculus has changed with the change at the top of the ticket, because I've heard him listen to him speak on a few things, and he clearly didn't seem to have a lot of joy towards Biden. He seemed almost as
Correct.
upset with Biden as he did with Trump. I don't know
Yeah.
if I don't I mean I didn't find any clips of him talking about the change, if that would make a difference for him.
Yeah, I honestly haven't seen anything either, which is interesting
Yeah.
that you point out. He
Not that he
also
should
had
do it just because she's a black woman and he's a black man,
For
but
sure,
because
for
the
sure. But he
energy in
may
that
actually
ticket.
have more positive energy towards Kamala Harris, which would be
Yeah.
great. But it would be better if he, endorsed her than running against her. If he
Yeah.
had, he had criticisms of Obama, he had criticisms of Biden. I don't know what his views on Kamala, and it's very interesting. I'm actually going to do some research on that to see if he
Yeah.
has said
I should
anything.
have looked it up before I asked that, but
No, no, but that's a great thing to point out because it'd be great if he doesn't have any negative criticisms, but he just thinks that he's, better. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if he, stops. Well, it's a month out, so maybe he won't. But
yeah.
it would be nice if he did endorse her and kind of rally behind because I believe people like him would be beneficial to a Harris campaign,
Mm,
to share what your views. Maybe you don't disagree with her on certain things. I know he has a lot of strong views on what's happening in Israel and Gaza. Offer what your advice would be, what you would do, and maybe
yeah.
that could help alter certain things. Because I do think he's a powerful voice. I think he's a needed voice. I think he's very intelligent. And I think we can all learn something from him. But again, offer your services as a consultant or be a part of the campaign rather than running against it and causing this rift that's
Yeah.
gonna, take votes away.
Because I mean, it does make a difference. I think, there was the progressives got behind Biden, and Biden was more progressive than we thought he would be.
For sure.
There was a lot of talk that, his Biden's, in the primaries in 2020, 2019, that he was kind of saved by the black vote coming out for him, and specifically the black female vote coming out for him.
Yeah.
And, his shortlist for VPs, was, I think, was all black women, if I'm
Yeah.
remembering
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah.
So that probably, and that's the change in action. It does
Hmm.
happen. Now it doesn't go maybe as far as you want, but that's where, because my daughter, at one stage was interested, the Green Party. I like the Green Party. And I was like, yeah, it's pointless. It's just pointless.
But that's the other thing is what are these parties doing in between elections? That's the other thing. It's like
Exactly.
you don't see Jill Stein
No.
ever
Yeah.
out
Well,
doing
having
anything.
dinner with Putin, I saw
Well,
her
that,
there.
yes, we all saw that. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, what is she doing in between? Who is she helping? Who is she, trying to talk to? Where is she advocating? It's you don't see her. She only shows up during election year. Somebody
Yeah.
called her a grifting cicada, and I thought that that was the funniest thing I had ever heard because she just
Yeah.
pops up every 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have cicadas here. We have very little wildlife in the UK. It's one of the advantages of being here. So when
Yes,
you go camping, you don't have to worry about leaving your food out, because there's no wildlife. There's
that's nice.
badgers, and that's it. But well, because I guess it kind of goes. It makes me remember that the heat that Biden got when he said, I can't remember the exact phrase that he used, but like, if oh, how can you vote for? You're not black if you don't
Oh
vote
yeah,
for
if you
me.
don't for a Democrat. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which
Yeah,
I didn't appreciate honestly
yeah,
because it did make the Black community seem like a monolith. Like we do all have
mm.
different views. I just think what and again, I don't want to be one of those people who's like, well, what he was trying to say, because that's what they do with Trump all the
That's what
time. He
exactly.
shouldn't have said it. And
Yeah,
it wasn't a good thing to say. But from my standpoint, I will say that I feel that Democrat policies and Democrat ideals align more with what the Black community is trying to achieve. That's what I
yeah,
will say. And had he said it like that, people probably wouldn't have been upset, but that's not how he said it, and that's not what he said, and he shouldn't have said it. So
yeah.
that's for me why I'm a Democrat. I feel that and also because I'm a progressive Christian, I feel like my views actually align more with Democrats, despite Christianity being tied to Republicans.
Mm.
So that's kind of my view.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that in just a second,
Yeah.
because faith is not something I've really talked about at all, and again, it's maybe partly because, again, in the UK, religion is much less talked about than it is in
Yeah.
the US, which has got
Yeah.
pluses and minuses. Um, just the other thing I realized when I was thinking about the stuff to talk to you about today, because the Republicans love a boogeyman, and they've created an awful, horrible, the stuff they've done with Springfield, Ohio, and the
Yeah.
hate, hatred towards the Haitian community there, and all of
Hmm.
that. But last election cycle, it was this evil lurking in the darkness called CRT and creative race theory. I just realized
Yeah.
I haven't heard anyone mention that for like
Well,
at
it's
least a
gone
year.
from
Where did it go? It was
100%. It's
coming
gone
to
from
take us all.
100%. It was first affirmative action, then it was
Yep.
critical race theory, and then it was DEI. So that's where
Hmm.
we're on now. We're on
We got some
DEI.
D. Yeah,
So
that's true. The
it's
DEI is
always
going.
going to be something different. It's always going to be a different a different acronym that is or a different phrase that's going to make to scare you that has actually had no impact on your life whatsoever.
Yeah.
They're very good at scaring their base into thinking things are happening that they're not, and their base trusts them. That's the problem. Their base
Mm.
trusts them implicitly, so they don't do their research. They don't do that little 5-second Google, like, should I be worried about CRT? Should I be worried about DEI? It's like, no, you shouldn't. Um, the other thing is th- the problem. How do I word this? I would say that the thing that scares them also is when you put like a qualifier on it or put a descriptor on it. Like when you say something about Black lives, when you say something
Mhm.
about immigrants or Haitians, it's specific, but they don't realize that they actually benefit from these things as well. Like, for example, calling Kamala Harris a DEI hire. They're saying that she's only there because she is a woman of color. Needless to say, a lot of them are only voting for Trump because he's a white man. It's literally the same thing. They're just
Yeah.
not saying it. So, yeah, they're just finding ways to make people scared by putting these descriptors on them, and it's not relevant at all. DEI is a very positive thing. Diversity makes you a better person. Equity gives everybody the same field, and including people should never be viewed as something as negative. We should all want to be included, right?
Mm.
So that's all it is. That's all it is. So it's wild what it's become and how they're able to change the uh, the definitions of certain things, like the word woke. Woke just means being aware. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
being woke. We should all be aware. And half of these people are asleep, so you need to be woke. Woke is not a bad thing, but they've turned it into a pejorative in order to control the narrative and keep people scared. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it was Karl Marx that came up with wokeism, is what I've seen or told, or it's so.
You sure it wasn't the
There's
communists or the socialists?
it was I don't know. It's just it's astounding because I'm a 50 plus year old man and have always thought about myself as a an open minded person and everything. But even with the conversations about wokeness and with the conversations that we've been having about George Floyd and that kind of stuff, I've learned things about American history that I should have known, you
Mm,
know, and like and then I just feel that I don't and I think that where people get all in their head, like, well, people are trying to make me feel guilty for blah blah blah, and I'm like, no, you didn't know it, you didn't know it, and now you know it. So
yeah,
what will you do with that?
exactly.
And and I'm not trying to say I'm like this wonderful person, but I'm like, okay, I had never had a concept of June 19th until the last 4 or 5 years,
Yeah,
and that's just
yeah,
the communities I grew up in, and the people who weren't actively trying to be racist, but it was not talked about or celebrated, and it's kind of like, oh my God. Like, and it just shows
yeah,
you how much there is not, well, I guess a cover up or whatever, the right phrase for it is, it's real. Like,
yeah, yeah.
how can I
And
have lived my entire life and not understand some of like the
right.
Tulsa massacre?
Massacre. Yeah, 1921. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the science fiction show, whatever that was called. That I'm like, oh my God. And I was a
Yeah.
history geek. I was a nerd,
Mm.
but it's astounding.
Well, I think people realize once the history is actually revealed that they have to reconcile with it and
Yeah.
understand that, oh, this is what we're trying to move away from. But if you don't acknowledge that something was an issue, then you don't actually have to do any work, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing with like Juneteenth and the Tulsa massacre, Juneteenth specifically, it blows my mind how upset people got about that becoming a national holiday.
Yeah.
It's like, aren't you happy that slavery ended? Like, why are we upset about this? I mean, I grew up celebrating Juneteenth. I always knew about Juneteenth. My mom, she was an educator, so that was always
Mm.
taught in our home, and I had books on it, and she made me take take things to my school, and I was embarrassed to say, like, oh, my mom wants you to learn about this. But again, it's not a negative thing, but also somehow people think that celebrating something takes away from something else. We're not taking away from Fourth of July, but
Yeah.
Fourth of July was not freedom for the Black community in this country.
Mm.
So we want to be able to celebrate the time when our ancestors were actually free. There's nothing wrong with that. And we as a country, if you think that this country is not a racist country, because that's what they love to say, then you should be happy that we're celebrating that this part, this dark part of our history is over. So I
Yeah.
never understood that. And then with the Tulsa massacre, of course they want to hide that because they don't want to believe that there was a point in this country where Black people were successful, happy, minding
Mm.
their own business, and white supremacists came in for no reason and just burned it down.
Yeah.
That's the and that's what happened. We weren't like the Black community was not doing anything to anybody. They were minding their own business, and it was just taken away from them because there was a certain sector of this country that could not fathom allowing them to succeed because they're like, how dare these people be happy after we've enslaved them, after we've separated them from their families, after we've taken everything away from them. They have the nerve to start their own economy, start their own town, their own businesses, and be thriving and happy. Oh, that we can't let that happen, you know?
Yeah.
So it's hard to accept that that was actually a part of this country. And then still, there's still a lot of people that have that mindset. And it's just
Mm.
kind of trickled down. Obviously, they're not burning down, Black neighborhoods anymore, but they're kind of, they're gatekeeping. They're gatekeeping.
Yeah.
They want to keep Black people from certain education, keep them from certain jobs, keep them from certain amount of success, unless they deem you worthy of something. You'll never see them block Black people from being successful in entertainment. You'll never see them block Black people from being successful in sports, right?
Yeah.
But certain things, they'll still find a way because they don't think that us as Black people should ascend
Mhm.
past them, right? That's the thing. Like, oh, we can't let them be
Yeah.
higher than we are. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what scary. I mean, it does. I worry that with Springfield, if they, I mean, it seems like they've kind of, well, no, they really haven't stopped. I mean, it was in the debate just this week
Yeah. Yeah.
that Vance wouldn't wanted to keep pushing the fact that these people are allegedly that they're not, illegal
They're
migrants,
not
they're legal
illegal. Yeah.
migrants.
Yeah.
That I worry that somebody's going to, there's going to be an attack there before long. I know
I
there's been
I,
the
I
bomb.
absolutely
That
absolutely agree.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. Um, okay. I knew that I was going to run out of time because I knew that because the faith and politics I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
Um, and I want to talk to you about Black Voices Heard, which is I know your latest
Absolutely.
project. And the one other thing I just want to get in before we turn to that is how insipid and irritating and how just that little line of racism when they say Kamala's name wrong. It's
It's
just
purposeful. It's
it's just like
purposeful.
that. It's just like a little poke, isn't it? And then if
Yes.
you see people call it out, then they'll be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I'm just blah blah." It's just such a
Yeah.
trap, isn't it?
What it is. So I don't know if you've read this book called Caste by Isabel
Mm,
Wilkerson.
I haven't.
Highly recommend it. I
Mm,
highly recommend it. It should be mandatory reading for literally everybody on earth. But what she talks about is that they will all in the caste system in this country, not necessarily race, but caste system
yeah.
of hierarchy, they will always find a way to put you in your place.
Mm,
And so little microaggressions like that of
yeah.
just mispronouncing her name is a way to keep the caste system in order of I, as a white male or a white woman or whoever, am above you, Kamala Harris, and I will mispronounce your name because you are not worthy of me pronouncing it correctly because
Yeah.
you are a woman of color. You are at the bottom of the caste system. And so it's this little microaggression that's actually very, very harmful and very, people are like, oh, it's not that serious. It's her name.
Mm,
It's dignity. It's respect. You would never mispronounce Biden's name. You would never
yeah.
mispronounce Trump's name, but it's purposeful. And so, yeah, I scream at the TV every time they do it because it's not that difficult. It's Kamala. It's not that difficult. But Kamala, like they're just doing everything they possibly can to show that I do not care or respect this person, despite not knowing her, despite never having had a conversation with her,
Mm,
only seeing that she is the woman of color that Biden chose to run in his place. That's
yeah.
all. That's
I
all.
mean, the only good times it's nice to see is when Trump goes on and on about how stupid she is, and then she goes on the debate and it's just clearly not stupid. Because I mean, that's setting him up to look like an idiot. But I don't know. It's
100. And
enough of
also,
him.
he donated to her campaigns when he was a
Yeah.
Democrat.
Yeah.
So you clearly didn't think she was stupid then. You
Yeah.
gave her money twice.
Uh, Jim Acosta this week on CNN called out Lewandowski. on saying her name wrong. I don't know if you've seen that
Yeah.
clip.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was
I did. I did. It
great
was
because
great.
Jim at the end was just like, "We might have you back." You
Yeah.
could tell he was just like, "I am done with you."
It's just because
Right.
it's unnecessary. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And somebody like that, I mean, I'm terrible at pronouncing anyone's names, regardless of which. So it's something I'm like when Pete Buttigieg, I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Pete Buttigieg. So from, and I had to, learn how to say Kamala's name because it's not a name I'd seen before, but
Right.
the whole Kamala is a good
Yeah.
way, is always the good way to remember
Yes.
it. Um,
Absolutely.
so I think that this is a bigger conversation because there's so much in the political thing. So hopefully, if you don't mind, maybe we come back after the election when things are good and to talk about
Would
this in
love
a
that.
longer way.
Yeah.
But you're talking about faith and politics. Um, I think you kind of said it before, but the right has kind of owned Christianity as a political voice,
Yeah.
which is ironic because many of their policies, I'm not a religious person, but I don't think that the way that they treat people is very Christian based on my
Correct.
understanding of what it means.
Correct.
Is it hard to be in the Democratic Party because there's the atheist side of I mean, is it a difficult space? Is that a
No,
problem?
I mean, I don't think it's a difficult space at all. I just think that we're not loud. I think that a lot of people
Mm,
don't know that there are, left-leaning liberal Christians. We exist. And that's
yeah,
actually who Jesus was. He was very progressive. That was his whole MO, right?
yeah.
He was helping people, loving people, trying to break down barriers for people. And that's what his whole thing was. So it's interesting that the right has been able to co-opt an entire identity of a human being and
Mm,
also the entire ethos of the religion when everything they do is the opposite. Their only thing that they think that they're following in the Bible is abortion, which there really isn't any explicit anti-abortion verses in the Bible. There's actually a lot of abortion in the Bible. But they also are focused on the LGBTQ issue, which has also been refuted in the
yeah.
Bible as well. And we're not going to go into a theology conversation, but I did want to go to Christian college and I was a worship leader for 6 years. And I've done a lot of research on this and the interpretations of certain verses and what things mean and the Bible passages and all of that. Like it's completely misinterpreted in order to control people. And, if people really looked at democratic policies, they are for helping people, they are for
Mm,
loving people, they're all for uplifting people. And I think the biggest thing for me that I've noticed when you quit, people question, like, well, how are Republicans Christian? They're not. They are about who they're against. They're never about who they're for. If you've ever
mm,
listened to their messaging, it's all about taking something away, keeping immigrants out, not giving people money, not giving people health care. It's never about what can we do for you. It's what can we take away from you. And that is the complete opposite of what it means to be a Christian. Now, what I do appreciate about Democrats is that there is a variety of walks of life and beliefs and faiths on the left side, which is how it should be. But we should
yeah.
all still be able to come to the common goal of, even if I believe and follow Jesus and you don't believe there's a God at all, we still believe that women have the right to choose. Even if
Mm,
I follow Jesus and you don't believe in God at all, we still believe that children should be safe in their schools, right? So that's the difference, is that we can all come to this common ground despite our beliefs on the left. The right, they're coming to a common ground, but like I said, it's all about what they can take away from people and who they're against. So it's not, I don't feel like lonely or like it's hard to be on the left because there are more atheists and less people that are spiritual and religious. I actually feel
yeah.
more welcomed over there, especially because of the way that I present my faith and the way my
Mm.
faith informs everything that I do. They're like, oh, you're a Christian I can get behind. You know, I'm the kind, they're like, you're what it means to be a Christian. I'm like, I'm trying to be. So,
Yeah, that's a nice thing. That's a good compliment to have. Yeah. Tell me about Black Voices Heard because I know that because you had a longstanding podcast,
yeah.
and you've wrapped that up in well, we say the autumn here, the
Yes.
fall, um, and you've started so I don't know if this is kind of replacing that project or yeah,
Yeah.
just tell me about
Well, I'm a mom of two, so I realized I had to pare down all of the projects that I was
it.
doing, just being realistic. But yeah, I had my podcast, We Need to Talk, for 4 years and 7 seasons, and I really did all that I felt I could do on my own. So I say that
Hmm.
it's on pause for now because I would love to have some reiteration of it later on, maybe with a co-host or something, but it's not done. It's just it's on a long, long, long hiatus.
Yeah.
But Black Voices Heard is a project that I started and wanted to find a way to amplify Black voices in a positive way, in this
Mm.
country and also give people a chance to hear from different versions of Blackness, because as I mentioned before, being Black is not a monolith, but what does connect us is our cultural experience, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, with social media being such a big thing, Reels and TikTok, I was like, this is a great
Mm.
time to just do, 90-second clips of people talking about their experience of being Black in their industry, being Black growing up in the
Mm.
neighborhood that they grow up, how politics affects them and different things like that. So my hope is that it really gets people to see and hear from the Black community in a different way. Obviously social media is a big thing. And I think that I was really inspired by Humans of New York. I don't know if you know or follow that account, but it's
Oh
really
no, I haven't.
beautiful. He goes around New York and takes pictures of them and just asks them their story.
Mm.
And I was really inspired by that because New York is, such a vast city and so many
Yeah.
people have different experiences of living in New York and it's just great. And so I was like, I wonder if I tried something like this kind of, but with the Black community. Like, what has your
Mm.
experience been in the area that you grew up? So it's Black Voices Heard Project on Instagram and on TikTok. And yeah, we're releasing videos like twice a week. So it's a lot of content, a lot of conversations, but I think it's really powerful.
Oh, that's great. And they're shorter than doing a full podcast.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. They're just 90-second
So
clips.
it's
Yeah.
an easier thing to do. Um,
Yes.
well, the final thing I want to just I try and finish with this question is just what, especially because we're pre-election. I guess what are you? I mean, I am feeling hopeful. I think that the trends are there. I feel like it's, um, but obviously it needs to be the work and all those kinds of things.
Yes.
But what is there anything that worries you in the next few weeks in the run up to the election day?
Only thing that worries me is that people may get complacent in thinking that, like what I mentioned before, like, oh, we have this. This is fine. No, no, no,
Mm,
no, 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 no. We have to keep running until the date of. You have to make sure people are registered. Make sure if you're doing an absentee ballot, turn it in on time. Please go to the polls, whatever. Don't. And I get it's frustrating because, as you've seen, there's been hundreds and thousands of registrations that have been pulled. A lot of people think they're registered and they're not.
yeah.
There's been some aggressive voter suppression going on. So people have to do their due diligence and not let them win, and make sure that they have taken the steps that they need to, check your voter registration deadlines, do all of those things, and honestly, keep posting the truth. Post
Mm,
what the policies are, post clips of things that she said, have conversations. I will say that if somebody's in MAGA and they're probably just voting for Trump, like I'm not even
yeah.
trying to worry about them, but they're still undecided voters, which is wild to me. I'm like, how are you undecided?
I know.
But though that's kind of what I'm also focusing on. It's like, hey, what matters to you? Okay, well, this
Mm,
is the policy that Kamala Harris has that's going to address that. What does Trump have? He ain't got nothing, right? So like that's how I feel. And so I think focusing on undecided voters and just making sure people are registered is really what needs to happen in the next month or so.
oh, that's brilliant. And it's nice to have something to work on as well for
Yeah,
people that
yeah,
want to do things. So thank you so much for coming on, Melinda, and would love to talk to you again at another time.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
So there you have it. That was brilliant. Malynda Hale, thank you so much for coming on. Check out her Black Voices Heard on Instagram and Twitter, or on TikTok. Check out her podcast, We Need to Talk, and her work in general, and her music, which is also incredible. Just an incredible range of things that we talked about, that gave me a different perspective, because obviously I'm way over here in England, and I'm also an old white dude. So there's some things that I just don't connect with. And I feel like I learned a lot from that conversation. So thank you to her and her team for getting us on. Thank you to Mark, the producer, for putting things together as always. And we talked about voter registration. Don't forget, if you're an American abroad or no Americans abroad, that there's still time to get your ballot and get your vote in. That's very important if you're looking for something to do to help with America as a thing. We'll be back again next week. Thank you once again to Malynda, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.